Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about organizational actors and specifically the kind of idea of who is a person, what is a person, and have a fairly, it's a heavy legal discussion on actors or persons in general. So when talking about organizational actors, it's really difficult to really even understand or have an idea of who are these organizational actors, who are these persons that are acting in any sort of case here. A new form of person was developed in the early to mid 1990s, right? Or I'm sorry, the early to mid 1900s. Corporations saw exponential growth in power as well as in number, and people started to realize they could kind of hide behind this corporate status. Oh, I didn't act like that as the owner of this business. The corporation acted like that. Therefore, I'm not personally liable. You can't come after my house, my car, my savings account. You can come after my corporation, though, right? And so it kind of insulates the people in power. However, corporations were designated as a juristic person then, right? You can't sue something that's not real. And so there was this idea of making a corporation a juristic person, which means legally, right? The law has decided you have personhood. Corporations were then recognized as having certain rights and duties. For example, they could own property. They could act in a unitary way. They could have responsibilities. Now, we use the terms rights and duties all the time, right? I have a duty to serve my country. You hear people say that in the military. Or don't you have a duty to your fellow man? What does that mean, though? What is a legal duty? Right? Basically, what this means is you have a legal obligation or responsibility to something. So, for example, you do not have a legal duty to assist somebody in any capacity, right? There are this idea that if you the kind of good Samaritan, right? If you're walking on the side of the road and you see someone who needs help, are you obligated to help them? Legally, you actually have no duty to do that because you might not have the capacity to help. If I walked by someone and I saw someone in a body of water drowning, but I didn't know how to swim, what good is it if I run out there and try and help them if I can't myself swim? There would just be two people in trouble now. And so when we talk about legal duty, it's an important distinction that corporations, by defining them as juristic persons, not only have rights, but they also have these obligations that come with those rights. So it's a really big discussion on whether or not it's good that corporations are viewed as juristic persons. Some argue it's a very good thing because now they have these duties they have to follow. But on the flip side of that, one of the big problems is they also now have rights. And how are those rights limited, and what do those rights mean? And we'll talk about a perfect kind of example of this tension between rights and duties in terms of corporations in a couple of slides. One of the things that also is present by recognizing corporate actors as persons, right, is there's this asymmetry of relations, right? If you notice here, right, in this little kind of Punnett square we have, a person interacting with a person, there is no real power differential there because people kind of more or less have the same rights, obligations, and resources on average. Corporate actors versus corporate actors, the same thing is true, right? More or less, corporations have the same rights, obligations, or duties and resources. So when Apple sues Samsung, or Microsoft and Apple get in an argument, or ExxonMobil versus BP, in this big corporate litigation, more or less, these are two corporations with hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, that can battle with each other in some sort of courts, right? However, where this asymmetry of relationships becomes a problem is if it's a person versus corporate actor. And if you see here on this chart, the 1 and the 3 are not really the issue. It's 2A and 2B where there's this power differential, right? A person has different rights, duties, and resources compared to a corporation. And when those two combat each other, it becomes a problem. The differential gives power to the corporation while also giving opportunity to the person, right? And this can be, again, a good thing or not. This, by acknowledging corporate personhood, we are acknowledging that a person can sue a corporation for a breach of their duty, right? That's why if there's a a puddle on the floor of Walmart, they immediately mop it up and put signs around it, because if you slip and fall in that puddle, you can sue them for it. However, at the same time, right, Walmart has a lot more money, and so they might have access to better lawyers and better resources in any sort of legal arguments with a person. There's also this idea of the irrelevancy of actual persons when acknowledging a corporation as a juristic person, right? True persons have become irrelevant in the operation of corporations, right? We don't actually care if Bill Gates is the CEO of Microsoft or Steve Jobs is the CEO of Apple, right? Steve Jobs has passed away many years ago, and Apple is still humming along, doing just fine. The same thing is true, granted, Bill Gates has not passed away, but he has since retired, and Microsoft is still a booming corporation. You can also see this beautifully. A beautiful example of this is popes in the Catholic Church, right? When a pope passes away, the church is not seismically changed when a new pope is elected. And in fact, even during that interim time when there is no pope, the church does not grind to a halt, right? There is still mass, there are still confessions being taken. So people also another example of this is people getting replaced by machines, right? We really don't need to worry about people much when machines and automation take over. But people are also being replaced socially, right? For example, CEOs are replaced constantly with no disruption to the function of the corporation, and I've already referenced this, right? There's also, though, this basic idea of in-basket management training exercises, right? The new manager, right, in whatever hierarchy, right, even at lower levels management, right, they're still asked to deal with and respond to correspondences from the old manager, make decisions or enforce decisions that old management made. And so a new manager comes in and they basically say, here's how we want you to behave, here's what we want you to do it. So that individual person's creativity, that person's demeanor, that person's even competency sometimes is largely irrelevant to the position. You are in position X as now store manager. You now run this store in this way, the way that we ask you to do it. And more or less, people do. Citizens United, though, as a legal case, is this kind of perfect example of this tension between people and corporations as persons, right? And here are some YouTube videos that kind of highlight this debate. The first video gives you kind of an overview of what Citizens United is, and then you hear Justice Antonin Scalia, who is one of the Supreme Court justices who helped formulate the majority opinion on the case, and the next video is Barack Obama, who was president at the time of Citizens United, talking about the case. And President Obama and Antonin Scalia have vastly different opinions on this case. But the basic idea and the basic tension that it boils down to, honestly, is corporate rights and corporate duties, right? Prior to Citizens United, corporations were not allowed to give unlimited campaign dollars to campaigns for political office in any real capacity. They just weren't allowed to do it, which people overwhelmingly were okay with because they didn't want corporations, quote unquote, buying the elections, right? However, in Citizens United, the case that got sued up to the Supreme Court said it is actually a breach of our First Amendment rights to freedom of speech. As a corporation or as a corporate interest, I should be able to give as much money as I want to based on my First Amendment right to speech. And Antonin Scalia points out, Justice Scalia points out very convincingly, right, that the First Amendment just says Congress shall make no law abridging the rights to speech, religion, the press, everything else, right? It does not ever say will not limit an individual's rights, a person's rights. It just says we'll make no law limiting it. So Justice Scalia's main argument is more speech is better. It's better to have a lot more speech and to give these corporations this right to speech. President Obama, on the other hand, would counter that, and the justices that filed their dissent would argue that this gives undue influence to corporations and undue power to corporations and allows corporations to spend unlimited money, even behind these shell organizations known as PACs, where basically if I wanted to get together with all my buddies, there's Corporation A, Corporation B, Corporation C, we all decide that we want Donald Trump to win a second term as president. So we all dump all of our money into this super PAC called Keeping America Awesome or something, right? Just for sake of argument. We all dump all our money into this PAC and then send that money out to campaign on behalf of Donald Trump for his reelection. The argument is that is just way too biasing of the process because it allows these corporations that have millions and billions of dollars to dump considerable resources behind a certain candidate, and that candidate, basically the argument is the candidate who gets more airtime and more advertising time probably will get more votes, and therefore corporations are picking presidents, senators, congressmen, not the people. Now, Scalia argues back to that, saying that people are not inherently lemmings that just follow the wills of a TV ad, right? Like people actually make their own opinions and they're not so easily swayed and influenced. But it still brings up this underlying argument of what role does a corporation play in our life? Are these people, is it great that they're people because then we can sue them, we can hold them to account and force them to have these duties, but in forcing them to have these duties, we also then must extend them certain rights. And some of these rights might be unlimited campaign dollars to elections. So let me know what you think about this. If you have questions about this at all, please comment down below. And I look forward to talking to you soon.